I know where you are right now. Not just in this moment, but in the texture of your heart. You've already lived through a morning that felt like climbing a mountain with weights on your shoulders. The sun is higher in the sky now, and somewhere in the middle of your day, you felt something shift. A heaviness settled in. Maybe it was hours ago, or maybe it was just moments before you found your way to this quiet pause. Maybe you didn't even plan to be here. Maybe something inside you simply whispered that you needed to stop, and you listened. I want you to know that stopping was exactly right. That whisper was not random. That impulse to pause was not an accident. It was an invitation. And you are exactly where you need to be. The weight of midday is real. It's not something we talk about enough. This particular kind of exhaustion that arrives when the day is only half over. You wake with hope. You move through the morning with intention. You pour yourself into the tasks before you. And then somewhere around the middle of the day, something in you feels the pressure mounting. The to-do list doesn't stop. The expectations keep arriving. The noise keeps accumulating. There's the weight of what you've already carried, the weight of what still lies ahead, and underneath it all, the quieter weight of wondering if you're doing enough, being enough, holding up well enough under the pressure that nobody else seems to be struggling with. But they are, and you are, and that's why you're here. The midday sun beats down on everything with an intensity that the morning light didn't have. Morning feels full of possibility, full of energy that hasn't been spent yet. But midday is the moment of reckoning. Midday is when you start to feel what you've already given, and you're only halfway through the currency you have to spend. Midday is when the shadows aren't soft anymore. They're sharp and honest. Midday is when illusions start to crack, and reality settles in with its full weight. Maybe your morning was filled with conversations that drained you. Maybe you're carrying a worry that arrived before sunrise and has been sitting on your shoulders ever since. Maybe you've been holding a difficult emotion at arm's length all day, and you can feel your arms getting tired. Maybe you're surrounded by people and noise and demands, and underneath all of it, you feel profoundly alone. Maybe you're sitting in silence, and that silence feels too loud with all the thoughts you're trying not to think. Maybe you're trying to hold it together, and you can feel the seams starting to separate. Maybe nobody knows how close you are to breaking, because you've gotten very good at looking like you're fine. I see you in that place, not with judgment, but with absolute tenderness. Because what I'm here to tell you, what I need you to hear in the deepest part of your being, is that your arriving here at this exact moment is not coincidence. This is not luck. This is not random. You are here because your heart knew it needed this, and God knew exactly when to place this moment in your path. Think about that for a moment. Not as a nice idea, but as a real thing. The God who knows every star, who holds the oceans in his hands, who understands the structure of every atom and the rhythm of every heartbeat. He also knows the exact temperature of your heart right now. He knows the exhaustion you're feeling. He knows the specific shape of the weight you're carrying. He knows why you're here. And he wanted you to find this moment. He wanted you to have permission to pause. He wanted you to know that in the middle of your overwhelming day, you matter enough to be reached. There's something profound that happens in the middle of the day. The world is still spinning around us. Things are still demanding. The clock is still moving forward. And yet if we stop for just a moment, we can feel something shift. We can feel the presence of something larger than our exhaustion. We can sense that we're not as alone in this struggle as we thought we were. In the chaos of the afternoon pressing in, there is a calm that exists underneath. There is a stillness that was there all along, waiting for us to notice it. There is grace that doesn't depend on whether we've earned it or deserved it or figured out how to make everything okay. Your life right now is not what you might have chosen if you'd known how hard it would be. The circumstances you're carrying might be different from what you imagined. The disappointments might be deeper. The losses might be realer than you want to admit. The challenges might be more exhausting than anyone outside your inner world understands. But here's what I need you to feel. Not just hear, but deeply feel. You are not being punished for any of this. You are not being tested beyond what you can bear. You are not forgotten in the middle of your heavy day. You are being guided. You are being held. You are being reached by someone who wants you to know that you don't have to figure this out alone. When we reach the middle of our day, we often reach the middle of our resources too. We've used up some of our energy, spent some of our emotional currency, depleted some of the reserves we didn't know we were drawing from. And in that depletion, there's an invitation. In that moment when we realize we can't do this by ourselves, when we finally stop trying to be strong enough to carry it all, when we finally admit that we need help, that's when grace has room to enter. That's when we become open to being restored. That's when we finally, truly, let someone else carry some of the weight. I want to describe something to you, something about this very moment. Imagine that right now, in the middle of your day, in the middle of your overwhelm, in the middle of all the pressure and noise and difficulty, there is a hand that reaches toward you. It's not harsh, it's not demanding, it's not pulling you away from your responsibilities or asking you to pretend that everything is fine. It's simply reaching, offering, inviting. It's the hand of someone who has been with you all along, even in the moments when you couldn't feel his presence, especially in those moments. And this hand is saying something so simple and so profound. I see you. I know what you're carrying. I know how heavy it is. And I'm here. I've always been here. And you don't have to do this alone. The middle of the day can be the loneliest time, can't it? When everyone around us is in their own struggle, in their own pressure, in their own attempt to keep everything moving forward. When we smile in conversations while carrying a heaviness inside. When we answer, I'm fine, while feeling anything but fine. When we look at others seemingly managing so easily, while we feel like we're barely holding on. There's a particular isolation in midday exhaustion because everyone is in motion around us and we can't seem to find solid ground anywhere. But what if, in this very moment, something is shifting? What if, in stopping to listen to this prayer, you're actually receiving permission to stop pretending? What if you're being invited into a space where you don't have to hold it all together? What if God is saying to your tired heart, I don't need you to be strong enough. I need you to be honest enough. I need you to be open enough to let me help you carry this. When I think about the God I believe in, I don't think of someone distant, someone checking off boxes or waiting for us to prove our worthiness. I think of someone who comes closest to us exactly when we feel most abandoned. Someone who sends comfort, not when we have it all figured out, but precisely when we're realizing that we don't. Someone who reaches into the middle of our chaotic day and says, this is not all there is. This heaviness is not all that's real. There is more beneath this. There is peace that exists underneath the pressure. There is light underneath the shadow. There is hope underneath the doubt. And you get to feel it. You get to experience it. You get to be restored by it. The middle of the day has always been a sacred time, though we don't often think of it that way. In Scripture, midday was the time of full heat, full exposure, the time when you couldn't hide anymore. It was the time when truth became unavoidable, and it was often in those exposed, difficult moments that people encountered God most directly. Not in the soft morning light of easy belief, not in the cool evening when you could rest in certainty, but in the hot, exposed middle of the day when you were most vulnerable and most honest about your need. That's where transformation happened. That's where hearts were changed. That's where people moved from trying to manage on their own to finally, truly letting themselves be held. I'm inviting you into that space right now, not with any judgment about what brought you here or how you're feeling, not with any suggestion that you should be different than you are, just with an absolute certainty that you are worthy of this moment. You are deserving of this pause. You are important enough to God that He wanted this prayer to find its way to you at exactly this time. You needed this today, and He made sure you found it. Feel the weight you've been carrying beginning to loosen just slightly, not because the difficulties have gone away, Not because your circumstances have changed, but because you're finally, truly giving some of the weight to someone else. You're finally saying, I can't do this alone, and I don't have to. You're finally admitting, I'm exhausted, and that's okay. You're finally believing, I matter more than my productivity, and God knows that. There's a truth that lives underneath everything, a truth that exists even when we can't feel it. It's the truth that you are loved not because of what you do, but because of who you are. You're loved when you're strong and when you're weak. You're loved when you're productive and when you're resting. You're loved when you have it all figured out and when you're completely lost. You're loved when you're at your best and when you're at your absolute worst. This love is not conditional. It's not based on your performance. It exists independent of your circumstances. And it is absolutely, unquestionably, reaching towards you right now. Somewhere in your day, maybe you encountered a moment where you felt truly unseen. Maybe someone looked right through you without understanding what you're carrying. Maybe you explained yourself and still felt misunderstood. Maybe you reached out for help and felt like your need wasn't important enough to matter. Maybe you felt invisible in a crowded room or forgotten in a moment when you needed to be remembered. I want you to know with absolute certainty, you are seen. Not by the people who might have missed you, but by the one who made you. The God who knows every hair on your head, every thought before you think it, every tear before it falls. He sees you. He sees the real you, not the version you present to the world. He sees your exhaustion. He sees your courage. He sees how hard you're trying. He sees how close you are to breaking. And he sees the strength that keeps you going anyway. He sees you in a way that no human being can. And in his sight, you are infinitely valuable. The exhaustion you're feeling in the middle of your day is not weakness. It's not evidence that you're failing. It's actually evidence of how hard you've been trying, how much you've been caring, how deeply you've been committed to the people and responsibilities in your life. Your tiredness is proof of your heart. And in being willing to acknowledge that tiredness, you're actually opening the door to something new. You're preparing the soil of your heart for a different kind of strength. You're making space for grace. You're allowing yourself to be restored. What does restoration even look like? What does it feel like when you finally, truly let yourself rest? It's not about the weight disappearing. It's about the weight being borne alongside you instead of being something you carry alone. It's about your shoulders dropping, your breath deepening, your mind quieting. It's about that moment when you finally stop fighting reality and instead surrender into it, finding that surrender is not weakness, but wisdom. It's about the shift that happens when you move from trying to control everything to trusting that you're being held. It's about the softening that occurs when you stop clenching every muscle and instead allow yourself to be supported. It's about the peace that descends when you finally, truly give permission to the exhaustion to be there without judgment. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine that the worry you've been carrying all day, the thing that arrived this morning and has been sitting on your chest ever since. Imagine setting it down, not forever, not permanently, but just for this moment. Imagine the physical sensation of that release. Imagine your shoulders dropping an inch lower. Imagine your chest expanding just slightly. Imagine taking a breath that isn't weighted down by that worry. That's available to you. That's not a fantasy or a spiritual concept that doesn't connect to real life. That's an actual possibility for your actual heart right now. The burden you've been carrying doesn't have to weigh as much in this moment if you're willing to share the load with someone strong enough to carry it. The middle of the day is also the moment of the greatest light. When the sun is highest, the shadows are sharpest, yes, but also the light is most powerful. There is nowhere to hide from the light at midday. Everything is revealed. Everything is exposed. And in that exposure, there is also clarity. There is truth. There is the chance to see things the way they actually are, not the way we fear them to be. And when we bring our fears and our worries and our exhaustion into that light, something happens. They start to look different. They're still real. They're still there, but they look less overwhelming when they're clearly seen. They lose some of their power when they're named out loud. They begin to change shape when they're brought into the light and examined with honesty and compassion. I'm here to tell you that whatever is weighing on you, whatever it is that made you stop in the middle of your day and reach for this prayer, it doesn't have to define your afternoon. The weight you're carrying doesn't have to determine how the rest of your day unfolds. You get to experience a shift. You get to feel a change. You get to let the atmosphere around you transform from one of pressure and exhaustion to one of gentle support and quiet restoration. Not by pretending that your difficulties aren't real, not by refusing to acknowledge what's hard, but by choosing to also acknowledge what's true about God and what's true about your worth and what's true about the way you're being held. There's a particular kind of grace that arrives in the middle of things. Not the grace that appears at the beginning when we're still hopeful. Not the grace that waits until the end when we've finally learned our lesson, but the grace that shows up while we're still in the middle of our struggle, while we're still confused and exhausted and uncertain. That grace says, I'm not waiting for you to figure this out. I'm not waiting for you to be strong enough. I'm not waiting for you to prove your faith or perfect your behavior. I'm here now, while you're in the middle of your mess, while you're uncertain and overwhelmed and barely holding on. I'm here in the middle of your day. When you allow yourself to feel the presence of that grace, something shifts in your nervous system. Your body knows it. Your heart knows it. There's a settling that happens, a permission that is granted, a burden that is slightly lifted. It's not that everything immediately becomes okay or that all your problems solve themselves, but it's that the quality of how you carry them changes. It's that you're no longer carrying them entirely alone. It's that you've invited someone infinitely capable and infinitely loving to help bear the weight. I want to speak directly to the specific exhaustion of your midday. You've been trying so hard. You've been showing up in ways that matter. You've been caring about things that are worth caring about. You've been responsible and present and committed, and now you're tired. That's not a sign that you've failed. That's a sign that you've genuinely, deeply tried. And now, in this moment, you get to lay some of that effort down. You get to receive instead of only giving. You get to be restored instead of only exerting. That's not laziness. That's wisdom. That's the beautiful cycle of trying and resting, of effort and restoration, of giving and receiving, that allows us to keep moving forward without completely depleting ourselves. The world will keep spinning. Your responsibilities will still be there. The difficulties won't disappear. But you will be different after this moment. You will be more able to face what's ahead because you've allowed yourself to rest, to pause, to receive, to let someone else carry some of what you've been carrying. That's how real transformation happens. Not through more effort, but through wise rest. Not through pushing harder, but through surrendering into support. Not through proving your worth, but through accepting that your worth was never in question. I want you to feel the temperature changing around you right now. Feel how the atmosphere can shift when you finally, truly let yourself be honest about what you're experiencing. Feel how the pressure can ease just slightly when you acknowledge that you can't do this alone. Feel how the day can look different when you look at it not as a test you have to pass, but as a journey that you're being guided through. Feel how your heart can open just a little wider when it realizes that safety is possible, that rest is permitted, that restoration is available. There's something about the physical act of pausing that matters. When you stop moving, when you actually step out of the current of your busy day, your nervous system gets permission to shift. Your breath gets permission to deepen. Your thoughts get permission to quiet. Your heart gets permission to soften. That's not wasted time. That's not avoidance. That's actually the most productive thing you can do right now, because what you do from a place of restoration is infinitely more effective than what you do from a place of depletion. You're not losing anything by pausing. You're actually gaining everything you need to move forward with more grace and more capacity. The God I'm inviting you to trust is not a God who is disappointed by your exhaustion. He's not a God who is keeping score of your failures or waiting for you to prove yourself worthy. He's a God who looks at your tired heart in the middle of your heavy day and says, "Come to me. Let me give you rest. Let me carry this. Let me help you. That's the voice speaking to you right now. That's the presence reaching toward you. That's the grace that placed this prayer at exactly the right moment in your path. Your life matters. Your struggles matter. Your tiredness matters. Your worth matters. And the fact that you stopped to listen to this prayer matters. It matters because it means you gave yourself permission to be human. It means you allowed yourself to acknowledge your limits. It means you opened yourself to receive support and comfort and restoration. That matters more than you know. That might be the most important thing you do today. I'm here to tell you that it's okay to be tired in the middle of your day. It's okay to not have everything figured out. It's okay to be overwhelmed sometimes. It's okay to need help. It's okay to admit that you can't do this alone. It's okay to be exactly who you are, exactly where you are. With all your struggles and your doubts and your exhaustion and your doubts, you're allowed to be human. You're allowed to be imperfect. You're allowed to be in process. And most importantly, you're allowed to be loved while you're becoming, while you're struggling, while you're still learning how to carry all of this. There's a shift that happens when we finally accept that we're being loved as we are, not as we think we should be. There's a freedom that comes when we stop working so hard to be good enough and start believing that we already are. There's a lightness that arrives when we stop carrying the burden of perfection and start carrying the much lighter burden of simply being ourselves. That's the shift that can happen for you in this moment. That's the freedom that's available to you right now. That's the lightness that's waiting for you if you're willing to receive it. The middle of your day is not the end of your story. It's not the measure of your worth. It's not the final verdict on whether you're going to make it. It's just the middle. And in the middle, you get to pause, you get to breathe, you get to be restored, you get to be reached by a love that doesn't depend on your circumstances or your productivity or your ability to hold it all together. You get to be held by someone who sees you, knows you, and loves you exactly as you are. As this prayer unfolds around you, I want you to feel your shoulders dropping just a little bit lower. I want you to feel your breath becoming just a little bit deeper. I want you to feel the tension in your chest easing just a little bit. Not because anything external has changed, but because you've given yourself permission to receive grace. Because you've opened yourself to being comforted. Because you've allowed the presence of God to touch the exhaustion you've been carrying and to begin, gently and tenderly, to restore your spirit. There's no rushing here. There's no pressure to feel better immediately or to have everything resolved by the end of this prayer. There's just an invitation to let yourself be in this moment, to let yourself be seen, to let yourself be comforted, to let yourself be held. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's exactly what you need right now. The fact that you're here, that you stopped in the middle of your day to listen to this prayer, tells me something about you. It tells me that you have a tender heart. It tells me that you still believe in the possibility of being comforted, even if you're not sure how that comfort can find you. It tells me that you're open to God's presence, even if you can't feel it most of the time. It tells me that you're not as closed off as you might feel. And that openness, that willingness to pause and receive, is the exact place where transformation begins. I want you to know something that might sound simple, but is profoundly true. God didn't make a mistake in creating you. God didn't mess up when He made you the kind of person who gets tired, who needs help, who struggles sometimes with doubt and fear and uncertainty. That's not a design flaw. That's part of what makes you human. That's part of what opens you to receiving grace. That's part of what makes it possible for you to be comforted and restored. Your vulnerability is not your weakness. Your need is not your shame. Your willingness to acknowledge that you can't do this alone is actually the beginning of wisdom. The middle of your day is not a punishment. It's not God saying that you're not doing enough, or not being enough, or not trying hard enough. The middle of your day is actually an opportunity. It's a chance to check in with yourself, to reconnect with what matters, to reassess what you're carrying and whether you need to let some of it go. It's a chance to be reminded that you're not alone in this, It's a chance to feel the presence of someone who loves you, who sees you, who is committed to your well-being and your restoration. What I'm speaking to you right now, this prayer, this moment, this pause in the middle of your overwhelming day, this is not random. This arrived in your life because you needed it. This found its way to you because your heart was reaching for something you couldn't name. This showed up because God wanted you to know in this moment that you matter, that you're seen, that you're loved, that you don't have to do this alone, that restoration is possible, that hope is real, that healing is available to you right now in the middle of your heavy, beautiful, difficult, sacred life. Your afternoon doesn't have to feel the same after this prayer. It doesn't have to carry the same weight. It doesn't have to press down on you with the same force. Something can shift. Something can change. And that change starts with your willingness to pause, to listen, to receive, and to believe that you're worthy of comfort and rest and God's infinite, unconditional love. I'm so grateful you stopped to be here. I'm so glad you listened. I'm so honored to have been part of this moment with you, and I'm absolutely certain that you're going to feel the difference as your afternoon unfolds. Not because all your problems will be solved, but because you've been reminded of a deeper truth. You've been touched by grace. You've been seen by someone who knows and loves you completely. And you're going to carry that with you into everything that comes next. You're restored, you're held, you're loved, and you're going to be okay.